morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good
morning.
Scott Edelman has published more than 75 short stories in magazines such as Postscripts, The Twilight Zone, Absolute Magnitude, Science Fiction Review, and Fantasy, and in anthologies too numerous to list. What will come after? Let's see here. Sorry. Collection. We've got many short story collections. And What Will Come After is currently a Shirley Jackson Award nominee in the category of single author fiction. Additionally, Scott works for the Sci-Fi Channel as an editor, and he was founding editor of Science Fiction Age, which he edited during its entire 8-year run. He has been a 4-time Hugo Award finalist for Best Editor. And I believe he is going to be reading Are We Not a New People?
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
From Zombie Apocalypse. Please welcome Scott Edelman.
Good morning. I'm going to be reading a story called Are We Not New People from Zombie Apocalypse, though you would not know that was the title of the book had you purchased the book and read it, because it's a very intriguing book. Stephen Jones put together a shared world zombie, I wouldn't call it a novel, I'm not sure what exactly you'd call it, in which the writers' names do not appear until the very end. So you would have to read the entire book and then later see who wrote what, because it's made up of entirely found material. Song lyrics, transcripts, emails, tweets, text messages, recording, all sorts of various things. And the story that I ended up doing, which you find out it was mine only at the end, because they want you to be absorbed by the world and only find out later people actually wrote it, is the next to the last story in the book. It is an address from the President of the United States. This is a world in which at the beginning zombies have taken over the world, starting in London and spreading, and people trying to figure out what's going on. And the next to the last story is an address from the President of the United States. The last story in the book, since this is a plague that began in the UK, is an address from the Queen. So that's why the President doesn't get to appear at the end. So normally I stand up and walk around, but since this is a presidential address, I will just be seated here and, deliver the well,
Oh, you got the seal.
I got the seal. It appears in the book. It's all
Alright,
documented.
okay.
There is a seal. My fellow Americans, well, my fellow Americans,
Well done.
I speak to you tonight from behind a hallowed desk within the most important building of the greatest nation on earth to report what many of you already know, what each of you must surely by now feel in your bones without the necessity of me even having to say the words aloud. And that message, one which has been long awaited, much anticipated, and frustratingly elusive, is this. The recent difficulties which we have endured as a nation are near an end, and our long national nightmare is almost over. We come together on this July 4th, both to observe a victory of the spirit and to share in a celebration of freedom. For the battles which in recent months have raged between the living and the dead have dwindled, and the stability and peace which we have enjoyed as a people, but which has lately escaped us, has been restored. That restoration is not yet complete, for we are not yet what we once were. But that victory is close enough at hand that we as a people should feel licensed to rejoice. What we gather in utmost gravity to observe today is both a beginning and an end, a renewal of hope made concrete in a people. We continue to be, as we have ever been, the last best hope of the world. The citizens of our great cities, Los Angeles, Chicago, even what remains of New York, have already experienced the fruits of our peacekeeping efforts, and we thank them for their heroic sacrifices, which continue even today. Cleanup operations are being completed as I speak. Much blood was shed in these towering metropolises on behalf of us all, and for that we are grateful. To those of you hearing this in our nation's suburbs and rural areas, in the small towns and hamlets, I'm aware that you do not yet fully share in the bounteous good fortune already gained by the rest of us. But I promise that you too will soon enjoy what we have traded our blood to earn. I pledge that I and the members of my newly formed cabinet will work tirelessly on your behalf until the order which has for too long escaped you been enforced. As long as one American lives in hunger, all Americans live in hunger. You have my word as one of you that this will stop. I speak also tonight to our foreign friends. especially those whose will was tested by the twilight struggle up to the new Festival of Britain. For if these trying times have taught us anything, these United States cannot be isolationist. I say that we are here to aid you in any way we can as you attempt to rebuild your country as we have rebuilt ours. We pledge to strengthen the bonds which have so recently tested. We pledge to strengthen the bonds which have been so recently tested. United, there is little we cannot do together. As I speak to you now so that future generations may understand how there came to be future generations for them to be a part of, I am well aware that you have not chosen me as your president with your votes. I have achieved this high office more through divine providence than through any deliberate will of the people. I am as amazed as any of you that it has fallen upon me to report to you tonight these truths. For while I always had faith that someday one of us would tell the story of our survival, I had no faith that it would ever be me come before you to tell it. No man may know the hour of his passing, and I had not expected the timing of mine to allow me to lead you. I feel humbled before the higher power which has brought all of us to this day. If I had been asked at the start of the great Civil War in which we were so recently engaged, one which tested both our nation and the world, whether I thought that destiny would lead me to a moment like this, I would have responded that I had expected to end up like so many of us whose daily lives evolved around the White House. Despairing, defeated, destroyed. But I am none of these things. I have survived, and so instead I am astonished, grateful, and determined. I have not sought this enormous responsibility, but I will not shirk it. And so, in the spirit of healing and reconciliation, I will share my thoughts on this day, at this time, on where I came from, how I got here, and where I'm heading. Where all of our fortunate race is heading, now that the bloody storm which threatened us is nearly past. It is important for people to know who their president is. There are days when even I do not recognize the great transformation which has overtaken us all, as a torch is passed to a new generation of Americans, born in this century, tempered by war, having just reached a hard-won peace. And so, let me tell you my story, the path which I have trod to reach this place. It is a uniquely American story, one which could have only happened here, a nation both melting pot and pressure cooker, a place where the low can be raised high and can be reborn. As I lay before you my thoughts on the recent unpleasantness, you will likely be surprised to learn, it surprises me still, that though I now hold the exalted office of the President of the United States, I did not begin my working career seemingly within reach of such a celebrated position. I was born of modest beginnings, unlike most who have in recent decades been called upon to lead this nation, which will, even after all we have endured, which is still, even after all we have endured, the last best hope for man on earth. I was never a congressman or a senator. I never served as a cabinet member. I've never held an elective office, nor did I ever, until now, feel qualified to do so. When I woke each morning, I never aspired to do anything more than, as is true for so many of you, provide an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. And so my function here in this place was one of the lowliest of the low, a nearly invisible cog in the machinery of politics. I hope that these unprepossessing origins do not disturb you, but I have nothing left to hide. On this momentous day in history, no truth should remain hidden, for I believe truth is a glue which will bind us together, not only as a government, but as a people. And so when I tell you that before the onset of the months of terror, I spent my days mopping floors, unclogging toilets, and other seemingly menial tasks, I do that in the spirit of such truth, to illustrate that in our blessed country, anyone can work his or her way up the food chain and rise to occupy the highest office in the land. In fact, I was attending the second of those duties when the sirens went off. I was down on my knees feeding a metal snake through the pipes. I'd been trained what to do if ever I heard such an alert, but I must admit I wasn't as smart then as I have become now. Recent experiences have made all of us wiser. But then I didn't take it that seriously. Yes, I'd been hearing tales of the dead come back to life just as you had, and I even heard more than that, for those in the White House were not immune to gossip, and so I had overheard the whispers of those for whom I toiled. But I lived in a bubble of sorts and never thought the plague would reach to this spot, to breach the walls of this historic building. The old me was foolish, I admit, and look back on who I was and the decisions that I made as if I was a different, distant person. But I felt safe in this building. I worked among the smartest men and women in the world, surrounded by brilliance, by those whose brains worked at a level far beyond that which I could then conceive. I thought that they could, if anyone could, figure out a way to keep us safe. I was stupid then, I guess, but I assure all within the sound of my voice that I've become much smarter now, for I have been lucky enough to absorb all the best and brightest had to teach. But that is now. Let us return to the beginning of things. Confident in my safety, rather than drop what I was doing and rush to one of the many protected areas for the lockdown, which we had so often rehearsed, I simply continued unclogging the pipes. I believe this to be just another drill, one of the many we had to engage in since the after effects of the unearthing of the plague pit in Great Britain and the rediscovery of what has become popularly known as the death. So I slowly and carefully retracted the metal snake and stepped back, feeling a certain satisfaction at a job well done, even one such as that. I take pride in my work. And then I stepped out into the hall and headed back to my workstation to return my tools. With everybody but me locked away in the many safe rooms, there was quiet to the building I'd never heard before. I allowed myself to enjoy that peace until I heard a thudding, thundering sound and turned a corner to find, well, you can guess what I discovered. You know. I don't have to describe it to you. I came face to face with someone dead, reborn. I did not know who he had been or where he had come from. I did not pause to wonder how he had breached the defenses and made it so far. I only turned and ran. I did not get far. I almost immediately felt a tugging at my arm, and my sleeve ripped from my work shirt and fell away. The dead that walk, as you know, are faster than any at first thought. Everything the movies had taught was wrong, as humanity quickly learned. I turned and twirled the snake, and the coiled metal caught my attacker at its ankles. It tripped, falling back from me as it went down. But though its fingers slapped at my skin, I was able to make an escape. As it rose to its knees, I raced to the nearest safe room, and I began hammering on the door, begging to be let in, and shouting out my code name, for yes, even I had a code name, as I prayed for them to realize I was still one of the living. And let me in they did, the two statisticians who were huddled within the small chamber. If they hadn't opened up their hearts to me, I would not be here with you today to help lead you through these trying times. Overcome with emotion, I crumpled in a corner and shook, and listened to men much wiser than me try to make sense of a future they never thought would arrive. As they talked of us and of them and the great war that was to come, a war unlike any ever fought before, I felt a great peace settle over me, and their words faded away. At some point, a moment beyond conscious thought, I realized in my soul that I had too much of discussion. The time for it had passed, and I had an undeniable urge to act. It had become time, in the words of the poet, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. And that is what I did. That is what all of us did. That is why we are here. Having taken from them all I could of value, invigorated by a sustenance of body and buoyed by a sustenance of spirit, I left them behind and moved on to the next such chamber, knowing somehow in that place beyond knowledge that only through digesting the wisdom of the greatest minds of our generation could I become what you needed me to become for us to move into a new, more serene, more peaceful future. For are we not a new people? My rebirth came with a scratch, unnoticed until I cowered in that corner, not realizing that a new hunger was being born, a hunger that would make me greater than I had once been, much like the hunger for freedom felt by those who founded this country. You who hear these words, who have also been remade into better selves, may have been reborn with a bite or the loss of an arm. These are not scars. Do not mourn for any of them, for these are medals, evidence of our admission to a greater age of peace. Those of you who are within the sound of my voice and have not yet joined us, our ancestors, know that we welcome you into our ranks. Embrace us. Let us embrace you. We are stronger than you. We are wiser than you. We are the citizens of a new America, a new world. Ask not what this new world can do for you, but what together we can do now that we have achieved freedom from man. As you go forward this blessed day, remember, as we resolve that those dead shall not have been reborn in vain, We are what you eat. Be wise in your feasting, grow wiser in your feasting, but feast and feast well. May the God who has reanimated us bless each and every one of you, and God bless these newly United States. This is in Zombie Apocalypse. It was just published a few months ago, which means that it does not appear in the complete zombie stories of Scott Edelman, which was published earlier in the year, which has 9 of my zombie stories, 3 of which were Stoker nominees, and there will be copies available at the signing if anyone feels so moved. And for those of you who came a little late and might not have received zombie puppets, here are some glow-in-the-dark zombie puppets as well. Thank you for coming. If any questions?
Yes, you mentioned your collection, but you didn't mention one of the stories is going to have some extra life, isn't it?
Yes, this has 8 reprint stories and 1 original, and the original story will be the lead in Stephen Jones' best new horror that will be coming out later in the year. That story is called What Will Come After. I just found that out about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and additionally, I should add, I also learned a couple of weeks ago that this collection is a finalist for the Shirley Jackson Award this year. The winner will be announced in July. So I was thrilled that someone to get an award named after one of my favorite writers to be nominated for such a thing. So thank you very much. And if there are no questions, I'll just yield the room. Maybe the next writer can get in early, and the previous writer left some candy. So